Very disappointed with myself. I feel like I let him down somewhere. I'm very aware, and I do know that Robert did smoke weed. I do know he would eat edibles. But yet I just trusted him in my mind, thinking that's where he would stop. And I was clearly wrong. I mean, clearly wrong. I missed the mark.
Mary Cosby is facing a pain no parent ever wants to experience after the loss of her son. And the situation is truly heartbreaking. But according to Mary, the story behind his passing is way more complicated than most people realize. She's now opening up about what she believes really went down during Robert's final days, and the details she's hinting at are raising serious questions. Reports say Robert passed away after a suspected overdose, and Mary has made it clear she was ready to do whatever it took to help her son fight his substance struggles. She was even willing to place him in rehab or allow him to stay behind bars if that meant he could finally get control of his addiction. But now, Mary is pointing straight at one person she believes played a major role in his relapse and the spiral that followed. The person she's calling out? His ex-wife, Alexia Smokoff. According to Mary, that connection may have been tied to the downward turn that led to everything falling apart.
I just got the news of Mary Cosby's son from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City about Robert Jr. passing away. And I literally had to stop myself from breaking out into tears.
If there's one thing viewers always noticed about Mary Cosby during her time on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, it's how deeply she loved her son, Robert Cosby Jr. She spoke about him constantly and never hid the bond they shared. Mary often said she tried for 4 years before finally having Robert. Because of that, she didn't just see him as her child. In her own words, he was also her best friend. That connection made the news of his passing at only 23 years old even more devastating, leaving Mary's entire world shaken in a single moment. Soon after the tragedy, a spokesperson for Mary and her husband, Robert Cosby Sr., released a statement that touched a lot of people. They said, "Our beloved son, Robert Jr., has been called home to the Lord. Though our hearts ache, we take comfort in God's promise and in knowing that He's finally at peace. We are grateful for your prayers and trust in the Lord to carry us through this time of sorrow." Members of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City quickly reached out as well. Some shared public messages of support, while others contacted Mary privately to offer condolences and let her know they were there for her during such a painful time. But even with all the sympathy pouring in, some details surrounding Robert's passing have left many people confused and asking questions. According to Salt Lake City Police, when officers responded to Mary's home after an overdose call, Robert had already passed away by the time they arrived at the scene. What makes the situation even more complicated is that Robert had reportedly been open about his struggles with substances for years. Around the age of 16, he began experimenting with things like nose candy, Xanax, and Molly. At first, it seemed like something casual, but after he stepped away from school, the behavior reportedly grew into something much harder to control. Mary later shared that she didn't fully realize how serious things had become until she noticed a big change in her son's behavior. He started becoming more distant, more isolated, and far quieter than usual. That shift worried her enough that she eventually decided to look deeper into what was really going on.
When you have a relationship with your son and you want to give him the world, you want him to have a better life than you did, you know? I picked up and moved to New York for 8 years so that he can have the best education. He could be in a diverse atmosphere so he wouldn't be raised like I was raised. I was the only one in my class that was African American. They would play slave movies and the whole class would turn around and look at me. And I do blame myself. I feel like somewhere I missed the mark on.
As soon as Mary realized what was happening, she moved fast and faced the situation head on. She wasn't in denial about her son's struggles and immediately started trying to get him the help he needed. After Robert was arrested, he eventually entered rehab as part of the effort to get control over his addiction. Mary even shared that at one point she actually felt a strange sense of relief knowing he was still in custody. In her mind, at least there he was being monitored and couldn't access the substances that had been pulling him deeper into trouble. She believed that in a controlled environment, he had a better chance of staying safe than if you were completely unsupervised at home. But while Mary was doing everything she could to protect her son and push him toward recovery, there was still one person who remained closely connected to Robert's life, his partner, Alexia Moff. Robert and Alexia's relationship went back years. The two reportedly started dating while they were still in high school, around the same period when Robert first began experimenting with substances. What started out as typical teenage parties and hanging out slowly turned into something much heavier as time went on. As their relationship grew, their lifestyle reportedly became more tied to that scene. The pair even shared posts online showing questionable behavior, including photos with candy-colored pills and prescription cough syrup bottles mixed with drinks like Sprite and other clear sodas. Those posts raised eyebrows for a lot of people who saw them. By the time Robert and Alexia quietly got married in 2022, many close to the situation felt the problems had already been building for years. Mary, however, didn't even know the two had gotten married at first. The situation only came to light after authorities showed up at her Utah home, with serious concerns about the circumstances surrounding the relationship. That moment reportedly shocked Mary and made her realize what had been happening behind the scenes. Once she understood the situation, Mary made it very clear she wasn't going to accept what was going on without a fight.
I love you more than anything. More than anything in this world. I think I love you more than Dad. Like, don't ever tell Dad I said that.
Oh.
But you're my friend. You're my son. You're my gift. God gave you to me. You're the only thing that ever made me happy. Before I had you, I was never happy. You came and you were so real. He was everything I hoped for in a person.
After Robert was separated from Alexia through therapy and the eventual divorce, Mary began to notice real changes in her son. His condition slowly improved. He started gaining weight again, and he seemed more present and aware of what was going on around him. For the first time in a while, there were signs that he was actually moving in a better direction. But Mary also picked up on something troubling. Every time Alexia found her way back into Robert's life, the progress didn't seem to last very long. The improvements would fade, and the old struggles would start creeping back in again. Robert had even been honest with his mother about one of the hardest parts of recovery. He told her that distancing himself from friends who were still using was incredibly difficult, especially when some of them began relapsing. And one of the people he had the toughest time fully stepping away from was his ex-wife. Mary understood something that many families dealing with addiction eventually learned the hard way. Recovery isn't just about quitting substances, it's also about changing the environment and the people around you. Robert had already admitted that the hardest part of staying clean wasn't always the cravings. Sometimes it was the pull of old connections and familiar faces that dragged him right back into the same risky situations. And according to Mary, that cycle seemed to repeat itself whenever Alexia came back around. She believed that every time Robert started rebuilding his life, something would happen that pulled him off track again. The progress would stall, the old habits would creep back in, and the stability he was trying to build would suddenly feel shaky. For Mary, watching that pattern play out again and again was incredibly painful, because it made her feel like her son was constantly fighting the same battle all over again. Mary says watching her son go through that cycle over and over again was exhausting and painful. Just when it looked like Robert was finally finding his footing, something would pull him right back into the same crowd and the same habits that had already caused so much damage. People close to the situation say Mary kept trying to create distance between Robert and the influences that made recovery harder. She encouraged treatment, therapy, and a cleaner environment where he could focus on rebuilding his life step by step. But the pull of the past can be strong, especially when relationships are tied to years of shared memories and difficult experiences. Robert purportedly struggled with cutting those ties completely, even when he knew it might put his progress at risk. And for Mary, that was the most frustrating part of it all. watching someone she loved to try to move forward while old connections kept pulling him back into the same storm.
You
Hi.
cute.
Hi.
What's going on? When's the last time you picked up?
Probably like an hour ago.
Oh, you straightened up an hour ago?
Yeah, just recently.
Oh. And did you drink out of that bottle an hour ago?
Yeah.
Mary eventually started putting the pieces together, and the pattern became harder and harder for her to ignore. Every time Robert seemed to regain control of his life, something would shift and send him back into the same dangerous circle. According to people close to the family, Mary began having serious conversations with her son about the people around him and how those connections could affect his recovery. She wasn't trying to control his life, but she desperately wanted him to see how certain influences were keeping him stuck in the same struggle. Robert reportedly understood what his mother was saying, and at times he even admitted that staying away from certain people was necessary if he wanted a real chance at turning things around. But breaking those emotional ties wasn't easy, especially when those relationships had been part of his life for years. And as time went on, Mary feared that the same cycle she had been worried about all along was quietly building up again behind the scenes. At one point, Mary believed things were finally starting to stabilize for Robert. He was spending more time at home, focusing on rebuilding his routine and trying to distance himself from the chaos that had surrounded him before. Friends of the family say Mary held on tightly to that period because it gave her hope that her son was truly turning a corner. She saw moments where Robert seemed calmer, more focused, and more willing to talk openly about his future. But behind the scenes, the situation may not have been as simple as it looked. Recovery is rarely a straight path, and people can sometimes hide their struggles even from those closest to them. Mary later suggested that there were signs she didn't fully understand at the time. Small changes in behavior, shifts in mood, and moments where Robert seemed to drift back toward the same influences she had been worried about for so long. As time went on, Mary started noticing small warning signs that made her uneasy. At first, they were subtle things, a shift in Robert's mood, moments where he seemed distracted, or times when he became distant again. For a parent who had already watched their child battle addiction, those little changes can feel like loud alarms. Mary reportedly began asking more questions and trying to keep a closer eye on what was happening around him. She wanted to believe that Robert was still moving forward, but deep down, she feared that something might be pulling him back toward the same dangerous path he had fought so hard to leave behind. And that's what made everything even more painful for her later on. Looking back, Mary felt like some of those warning signs may have been pointing to a deeper struggle that was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. Eventually, the situation reached the point where Mary could no longer ignore the fear building in her heart. She had spent years trying to guide her son toward a healthier life, supporting treatment, encouraging better choices, and doing everything a mother could to protect him. But addiction can be unpredictable, and even the strongest support system doesn't always guarantee a smooth road to recovery. Mary knew that Robert was trying, yet the pressures around him seemed to keep pulling him in different directions. According to those close to the family, Mary continued checking in on him, hoping that the progress he had shown before would return. She believed that if he stayed focused and kept distance from the influences that caused trouble in the past, he could still rebuild his life. Sadly, the reality that unfolded later would leave Mary questioning everything that had happened during those final days.
All the people that I was like cool with, they all relapsed.
Sources close to the situation say that even after the marriage ended, Alexia still had direct access to Robert. The connection between them never fully disappeared, and that lingering closeness reportedly kept him pulling him back into the same complicated dynamic. But there's more to the story. Some insiders claim that several of Robert's most serious relapses happened not long after reconnecting with Alexia. Times that should have been focused entirely on recovery suddenly turned into moments of confusion and emotional chaos. According to people familiar with the situation, whenever communication between Robert and his ex-wife became unstable or stopped altogether, his behavior would reportedly spiral again. The emotional stress surrounding that relationship seemed to have a strong effect on him. At one point, the situation even escalated to the point where Robert was arrested after showing up at her family's home because he believed she needed his help. People close to him said he genuinely thought he was going there to protect her, showing just how intense and complicated the situation had become. Now, Mary believes that while addiction was a serious struggle in Robert's life, the emotional weight of his relationship and marriage may have also played a role in the difficulties he faced. She has reportedly asked herself a painful question over and over again. Would things have been different if their paths had never crossed? Sources close to Mary say she is completely devastated and overwhelmed with grief. She has reportedly expressed deep regret, wondering if there was anything more she could have done to shield her son from harmful influences and difficult situations. Right now, many people around her are simply trying to offer support and compassion during this heartbreaking time. Fans and viewers have also been sharing messages online, reminding others how much love Mary clearly had for her son. Some have even written messages saying, "Say what you want about Mary Cosby, but you can tell she loves her son deeply." Others added that she poured so much of her heart into raising him and always wanted the best possible future for him. People who have followed Mary's life for years know how much Robert meant to her. He was her only child, someone she often described as her best friend and the bright light in her life. Losing him at just 23 years old is a tragedy that has left many people deeply saddened. What do you think about this heartbreaking situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next update.